Hey ladies and gents, welcome back. This is going to be part 1 to What If Naruto Became Corrupted. So you might be wondering exactly what this is going to mean, but obviously I'm going to be explaining that in the what if. But for now, just like and subscribe and also check out my Discord. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. So yeah, let's just get into the what if. So, obviously you guys might be wondering exactly what form of corrupted I'm talking about. Like, corrupted in the sense that he's greedy, corrupted in the sense that, like, decay and everything like that, or some, like, anime term, or, like, some kind of video game. Well, kind of a mixture of a few different things. I basically came up with my own type of concept, I guess you could say, by more or less combining a few different things, and then you basically making the color scheme be more like a purple black kind of color, because that's generally what you would, use for the whole corrupted thing. So with that being said, let's just actually get into the what if and how Naruto's actually going to become corrupted and everything like that. So Naruto at this point is around 15 years old. He would be training with Jiraiya at this point, and yeah, that's basically all I really need to say about that. He's training with Jiraiya until something odd happens. A sort of meteor would actually begin crashing down on the Earth, and obviously this would happen kind of close to where Naruto and Jiraiya would actually be training. Some of the Leaf Ninja would actually hear this happening because Naruto was actually relatively close to the Leaf Village at this point, and a few people from the Leaf Village would head over to this crash site. There they see Naruto and Jiraiya standing outside of it as they wonder exactly what was going on here. They explain that this thing crashed down in the forest pretty decently close to them. Actually, they're really glad it didn't hit them because they might have died from it, but they don't really know what it is. Everybody looks down and they see this weird purple black rock. It's basically, it's just chilling there. It hasn't really done anything yet, but it hasn't really been there for all too long. So one of the ninja, well, even Naruto at this point, would actually be a little bit curious as to what this is. They jump down into the crater and they begin looking around at this big rock. They're really confused by what exactly it is. Naruto, being the curious man he is, he's just like, I'm gonna crack this bitch open. So he makes a Rasengan and he slams it into, the rock itself. Obviously with this happening, the rock would it would basically carve a hole into it, as what was shown with a tree or a stone or really anything like that. With a hole being carved into it, it's actually revealed that this thing isn't necessarily hollow, but it's also not entirely rock. The inside of this big thing has a mixture of liquid and gases inside of it. Obviously, these gases being, lighter than the air and lighter than everything else around it would begin going out of the hole that Naruto created and spreading out into the nearby area, basically, going around all the different people around. At this point, Naruto jumps out of the way. He's actually quick enough to get out of the way, and he and Jiraiya are far enough away where the gas doesn't quite spread to them just yet. However, the other Leaf Ninja aren't actually so lucky. Within moments, there doesn't really have to be time for a reaction, they begin falling to the ground as their body begins decaying away. Their veins begin turning purple as it spreads across their entire body. Eventually, obviously, their body would be completely decayed at this point, and they'd be basically lifeless husks on the ground. And as they're, basically breathing their last breath, I can't fucking talk right now, they release basically gas spore as it begins to spread out, much farther than what the original gas cloud had done. Naruto and Jiraiya are just like, shit, we gotta get the fuck out of here, and Jiraiya and Naruto both use the reverse summoning jutsu in order to get the fuck away. Now, obviously, this spore would actually begin spreading around. It would basically go to wild animals and everything like that. It would infect them, they would die, and this virus would spread around the world very quickly, as a matter of fact. It would spread around so quick that Naruto basically, or obviously Naruto and Jiraiya are able to escape it. They're on the complete opposite end of the world where nobody really knows how to get to. However, the Leaf Village isn't anywhere near as lucky. A few people might actually be able to get out, people who could use the reverse summoning jutsu, or people like Might Guy who would be fast enough, Might Guy Lee, and maybe a few others like Kakashi would actually be able to escape this basically gas cloud. However, many people wouldn't be that lucky. It would overtake them, as basically what had happened earlier would happen to them. First, their veins. It would begin turning purple before spreading around their entire body, before it would begin to decay. Obviously, with this happening, they would all, explode into those spores, and quickly, the spores would spread around, the entire world. all the different villages everywhere would actually have these, with the select strongest people of each of the villages being basically the only ones left alive at this point. Obviously, this would be quite a bad thing for the villages and everything like that, and this, yeah, it's really just a bad thing. The remaining villagers from each of the different villages would try to basically meet up with one another. Most of the Kages had survived, including Hiruzen, because they're just strong enough and fast enough in order to go away from wherever this gas cloud was, use the reverse summoning jutsu. Basically, they'd be able to get out fairly easily, along with some of the more higher-ranking shinobi in each of the different villages. So, obviously speaking, this would be quite bad, like I was saying earlier. Like the majority, probably like 98 to 99% of the population of the Earth had just been completely wiped out almost immediately. And of the locations that people can actually hide out at and don't really have to worry about the cloud are very few and far in between. They'd basically have to be completely underground and in areas that didn't really have life forms before, because of the fact that if an area had a life form, it most likely would have been infected, and then the gas cloud would have been revealed from that animal or whatever it actually was. So they'd have to go to areas without basically anything, any sort of life at all. No insects, no nothing. So with them going to these locations, there's obviously a reason for those locations to not have things inside of them. They'd be rough areas, very cold, very hot, something like a desert or an Arctic area. So with this happening, all the different villages would be living in very suboptimal conditions. They might have been able to save a few animals in order to start up farms and do everything like that, and basically they have their areas mapped out. The areas where they can actually walk and not really have to worry about that gas, I keep saying glass for some reason, but I don't know. Where they wouldn't have to worry about that gas cloud. Naruto and Jiraiya would still be training at Mount Miyaboku at this point, because, that's exactly what they began doing. Naruto gets Sage Mode, obviously, he masters it, and Jiraiya would actually end up mastering the Sage Mode. Basically hoping that maybe it would do something to help him against all this weird virus thing that's been spreading around. So this is very concerning for basically everybody, including, Naruto and everybody else. And Naruto and Jiraiya would begin trying to find exactly where basically anybody left alive would actually be. So they begin exploring. They make gas masks and would actually begin exploring the world. They begin trying to find people. Eventually they obviously do come across some people, however these people are not from the Leaf Village, or at least that's not what they think they are. So they would basically move on, until eventually they do actually stumble across the people of the Leaf Village. So they walk into their base camp as they take off their gas masks, and everybody's like, how are they walking through that? They explain exactly what these devices are, because, Jiraiya is pretty smart like that. I mean, Kakashi is alive, so they probably would have figured it out, but still. So they're like, okay, well, that's pretty cool. You want to make more so we can actually do stuff? So obviously, the ninja world would be basically distributing around something similar to like what we would have as a gas mask. They probably already had them, all things considered, but yeah. So with this actually happening, Naruto and Jiraiya would basically begin exploring the world, trying to basically create an alliance with some other village. They don't have enough, basically, females and males in order to try to build up a population sufficient in order to basically, be strong enough to fight against things, and they want to try going back to what they used to have as fast as possible. So Naruto and Jiraiya would begin going to the different villages. They'd heard a few words about different areas where people actually were, and now they want to go to one of those areas. So obviously speaking, they go to one of these. This first one actually being the Sand Village, because reasons. So, obviously Gaara had already been, befriended Naruto, and he could use his sand as a way to defend against the, basically, spores. So, most of his village, or not most, but a pretty significant amount of his village had actually survived because of basically, the way the sand worked. It kept the air out, basically, or the air, yeah, whatever. It basically allowed them to actually end up surviving. It kept the gas out. So most of, actually, the villagers of the sand had actually survived. Naruto would explain to Gaara exactly what had been happening, or at least with most of the other villages. They didn't have that same capability. And Naruto explains this, and Gaara is just like, oh, well, I mean, we wanted an alliance anyway if they didn't already have one, which they might have, I'm not actually sure. But they created an alliance, and the rest of the Leaf Village would actually begin heading over to where the Sand Village was, because they have a bigger area in basically order to operate in, along with having larger farms and everything like that, because Gaara was better able to defend it. So, with this happening, the next village Naruto and Jiraiya would begin going to would actually be the Land of Lightning, or where the Raikage and actually some of his subordinates would actually be. So they would basically begin searching around that area where the village used to be, and eventually they find a very small outpost. Obviously these people would already have gas masks and everything like that, and they'd see Naruto and Jiraiya coming from a pretty good distance, so they'd be ready for them when they would arrive. They had heard of basically the two people that were coming, being the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki and one of the 3 legendary Sannin. They didn't really seem to be too absurdly equipped with weapons and everything, so they don't look like they're going to fight, at least that's what everybody thinks. So Naruto and Jiraiya would basically begin walking in, and obviously people would stop them. They'd ask exactly what they wanted. Jiraiya would begin explaining his reason for being here. How basically no village, other than the Sand Village as they recently found out, has had any amount of reasonable population in order to repopulate the world. And they're going to need to try to band together in order to be able to survive against this weird menace, which is obviously the gas. So they're like, okay, well, obviously the Raikage is not going to immediately agree. He's not the kind of guy to do that. For one, he's very stubborn, and for another thing, it's the fucking Raikage, let's all be honest here. He is very stubborn, and he basically is just like, well, the Uchiha are there, basically, kind of a thing. So he wouldn't be immediately down to just be like, okay, well, we'll go join up with you. So he's just like, send word to the Hokage that I'll have time to think about it. From now, just get out of my village. Jiraiya and Naruto are just like, well, came all the way here for jack fucking shit at this point. So they would actually begin leaving, and they end up leaving again, obviously. So with this happening, they return to the Leaf Village, and Hiruzen basically tells him, he's just like, there's no point in going to the other villages. The Mist at this point, I'm not sure if it was still the Blood Mist or not, but he knows that there's going to be very little chance, because they still think Yagura is the leader of that. So they're like, yeah, we ain't doing shit. We can't get them to ally with us. And he thinks about the Rain Village, and Jiraiya is just like, no. I've heard word pretty recently, as a matter of fact, that the leader of the Akatsuki is actually kind of the leader of that village. So that won't be good. I don't think that's a great plan for us to actually go. So Hiruzen is just like, okay, so it's just us in the sand then. Interesting. So they begin trying to rebuild their population and rebuild all the technology that they used to have, actually rebuilding it to the point to not necessarily what it was in Boruto, but they basically had a complete reset. They definitely advanced technology to a much higher degree than it actually was before. So with this actually happening, the ninja world would basically slowly be seeing more and more peace at this point. The gas would begin residing back away towards its origin point, being the last point actually remaining. The villages would basically be slowly returning to normal, other than the Sand and the Leaf Village, who basically kind of merged together at this point. They didn't really feel like changing that fact. So the gas seemingly actually residing away, Naruto and Jiraiya take off their masks, and they're like, okay, well, we don't really have to do shit anymore. And eventually, they stumble upon something quite interesting. That rock that actually crashed down at the very, basically, beginning of this entire story. They're like, oh, that could be quite valuable. And then Naruto remembers. He's just like, wait a minute. I was the one that started this entire thing by throwing a Rasengan at that. That's not great. Naruto begins walking down into this basically crash site once again, where he looks into the hole that he had created originally. And there, he sees it. He was actually expecting most of the water, or whatever the fuck that liquid was, to be dissolved at this point and completely gone. Or something with the gas had actually made it go away. However, that's not the case. It's still completely full, and it's actually creating more gas. Basically, an earthquake would be happening at this point, and it would be shaking around. Some molecules would be basically going up into the air as the gas would begin spreading around once again. Naruto realizes that the shaking of the ground would actually cause this, and he's like, oh fuck. shit, this is bad. Jiraiya, not being in the crater at this point, is able to get out of the way. However, Naruto is not so lucky. Naruto would basically inhale a pretty decent breath of this stuff, and just like Jiraiya Naruto had seen before, Naruto looks down at his hand. Or not his hand, I don't know. We'll say it's his hand for, convenience. He looks down at his hand, and he sees that his veins begin to turn purple as it spreads around his entire body. It starts spreading out as Naruto feels a massive amount of pain as he falls to his knees and basically crying at this point. He's like, fuck, this fucking hurts, like, holy shit. Naruto doesn't really have all that amount of time to actually react to what's happening around him, as he's just basically crying out in pain on the ground. His regeneration factor from being an Uzumaki, along with having the Nine Tails inside of him, it would not be enough to actually, regen him enough. However, Kurama has another idea. He knows that because of this virus, it would basically constantly decay Kurama. It would basically never really allow him to resurrect again. It would completely kill him off because of the fact that it would constantly be decaying at his chakra if he tried to rebuild it. So he has to save Naruto. He would basically begin giving Naruto tons of his chakra. He'd be throwing his chakra into Naruto at this point, just trying to get him to be able to out-regenerate the basically decaying factor of this corruption. As this happened, it would be enough. Naruto would slowly begin regenerating, and Jiraiya is watching this as the Nine Tails cloak begins forming around Naruto, and Naruto's body decays and then regenerates and decays and regenerates over and over again. This happens for literal hours, and Naruto at this point is slowly regenerating, yet slowly decaying at the same time. The decaying process is actually slowing after most of the actual stuff had basically been completely gone from Naruto's body at this point, and it's not looking too great for Kurama either. He's nearing the end point of how much chakra he actually has. He's reaching that point where he's almost unconscious, basically giving Naruto the last of his chakra. Naruto has enough time to regenerate for probably about another 20 to 30 minutes. Naruto continuing to lie on the ground in agony. Eventually, the decay would cease. With this happening, Jiraiya looks at Naruto now, who'd gone through a basically complete and utter body change. Kurama is inside of Naruto at this point, completely exhausted and sleeping. However, Naruto could be no different. Naruto looks over at Jiraiya now. His hair and eyes both purple, as Naruto's cloak, or not really his cloak, well yeah, we'll just say it's a cloak because it looks more badass, basically completely turned black and purple, with nice, actually pretty decent stripes, as the gas had affected Naruto's clothes. Naruto puts his hood over his head, and we begin walking away from Jiraiya. Jiraiya stops Naruto, wondering exactly what had happened to him, how he even survived that in the first place. However, Naruto was not having it. The gas had changed his mindset, and he had a different thought in mind for what he wanted to do in the future. However, that's where I'm going to leave this part off, so I'll see you guys in the next part. Peace out, bye.